Everyone, it's Emily Fox. Today's video is going to be my March wrap up. This is going to be a long one because I finished 11 books this month. That is absolutely insane. I did DNF 2 books, so I did not finish them, and there is one that I'm currently reading. So definitely grab some tea or something because a lot of reviews. As always, I'm going to go in the order that I did finish them. So the first one was Kindred by Octavia Butler. This author tends to mix difficult topics like gender, racism, slavery in this case, and time travel, science fiction elements, in this case, time travel. And you're following this woman, Dana, a black woman who lives in 1979, and she's sent back 150 years prior in Deep South, where she will have to deal with racism and slavery. And the first time she appears there, she sees this kid drowning in the river and she saves him. She has no idea why she keeps being sent back there and she has to survive. The author doesn't sugarcoat anything. It is very difficult to read, but it was amazing. We could just really feel the main character struggling to morally figure out what to do next. I feel like I don't want to say more, but I kind of want to. Let me know if I should say more because I feel like there's some good elements to add to this, but I feel like the less you know, the better. But yes, overall, it's less than 300 pages. It's a quick read, but it's very, very difficult to go through, and I adored it. The first sentence, I didn't mention it in the video about best first sentences. It starts with, "I lost an arm on my last trip home." So you know it's going to be a very difficult read. Gave it 5 stars, highly recommend it. You need to pick it up. Actually, as I was reading this book, I was listening to the audiobook, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. This was the 10-year edition, so it was published 10 years ago. Another very difficult read. In this case, the author mentions basically the movement from slavery to the Jim Crow laws to nowadays-ish with the war on crime and being difficult on crime and the war on drugs, and how it's disproportionately affecting young black men in the US. And I really liked how the author explained the whole thing very plainly. It's very accessible. Everyone should read it, would benefit from reading it. The book definitely explained very clearly how the system is meant for them to be stuck in the system and impossible for them to get out of it. And I think that while reading this book, it was even more shocking of a read. Highly recommend it. Did enjoy it. I don't really tend to rate my nonfictions, but it would be like a 5-star or something. Like, definitely recommend it. I feel like because it was published 10 years ago, it also makes it difficult to read because we know now that things did not get better in the last 10 years. If anything, it got worse. So yes, if you're looking for a new nonfiction to pick up, definitely do recommend A New Jim Crow. Then we had Jade City, which was our book club pick of the month on Patreon. Technically, Kindred, I also ended up doing videos for it because so many of us were excited, and I mean, we all pretty much loved it, so good sign. But Jade City was our official book pick of the month, and it is an adult fantasy series which I've seen here and there on Booktube or in Goodreads, and I didn't know that much about it. Went into it pretty blind. All I knew is that some people were comparing it a little bit to Godfather, and I get the vibes because you're essentially following war between two like crime families, and there's magic, which I'm always all for, and a ton of political intrigue and just fights for anyone that is into that. The first half, I'm not gonna lie, it took me a while to get fully into it. I don't know why, but for some reason I would read one chapter and put it down. But things definitely picked up towards the half, which obviously not gonna spoil it, but things get very, very interesting and intense. And I ended up really caring for the characters. Towards the end, I'm left just wanting more, and I will definitely be picking up the second book. Actually, the third book is coming out a bit later this year, so if you don't like to wait between books, you can binge read the series, no problem. I will hopefully do that. So really interesting book. Definitely think it's worth the little hype it's been getting. I would say it's a 4.25 star for me. I am really curious to see what else will happen. I really enjoyed the premise of having it like a family. So definitely do recommend it. Some struggles between them, and I want more of the magic system for sure, as always. I did actually finish 3 different arcs this month, advanced reader copies, so books that are coming out later this year, and I wanted to share my thoughts right now. The first one is A Psalm for the Wild Build by Becky Chambers, which is coming out in July, and I love Becky Chambers. I feel like it's no secret. I've read actually every single book I think she has written, even 2 that are coming out like now or later this year. So I'm definitely keeping up with her. I always mention how her writing just feels like home for me. It's like very comforting and soothing, and she tends to have really inclusive stories. She tends to mix these sci-fi topics with talking about things like gender. In this case, you're following a monk who is non-binary, by the way, which I thought was interesting because everyone else would be called brother or sister, and I was wondering how she was going to do that, and then she used the word sibling, and I'm like, obviously, now that you've said it, you know, it's super obvious. So you're following this monk who doesn't really know what to do with their lives, and they end up meeting a robot, hence the monk and robot name for the series. And the robot is sent on a mission to ask people what they need, and things happen. It's super short, it's like 160 pages, but definitely maintain my interest, and I want to continue the series. I know there's at least one more book coming out. I don't know about more, but I will be reading that one for sure. It's very character driven, so it's kind of difficult to really give you more of a description than that. So they just have really interesting discussions together. The next book that I finished was Black Sun, and I was not prepared for this. I did end up reading this in one day. That was like one of my reading vlogs this year, 24-hour, trying to finish a whole book. And it's 450 pages, so it's not a small book. It's an adult fantasy. And I have to say, that first chapter, though, just made me want to do what the heck. The book literally starts with the main character, who is a teenage boy at the time, being drugged by his mom. And then she carves a shape on his body and makes him look at the sun in a solar eclipse until he's blind, and then she sews his eyes shut before she unalives herself. That's the first chapter of the book. So definitely be prepared. A lot happens there. There's a ton of political intrigue. There's some really interesting characters. I feel like I prefer the point of view whenever they were on the boat. Anybody else agrees? But there are some giant crows. Like, that could be, like, people can ride the giant crows. The magic was interesting. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about how it ended. I am not satisfied. Like, I want more, but there's a second book at least coming out. I don't know when, but when it comes out, I will be picking it up. Definitely super interesting, definitely unique, a little weird, but in a good way. And I would highly recommend you check it out. Actually, if you care for diversity, there are 2 non-binary characters and 1 trans woman who are just there. I feel like they're my favorite kind of representation when it's just like not really important in the story, they're just there. So yes, definitely do recommend this book. Rating wise, I would say a 4-star. Oh, I almost forgot, I did listen to the audiobook Exit Strategy, which is the 4th book in the Murderbot Diaries series, which I'm all over the place with this series because it's an adult sci-fi, but they're all really short, almost novellas. This one is like 150 pages. They're all under 200 pages, basically. And every time I just feel like I want more. I'm left unsatisfied because they're too short. I really like the main character, Murderbot. They're a mix of robot and human, kind of. And they don't really like humans. That's the best way of describing it. They're really funny, but every single time, pretty much, I'm just not happy when it's done because I didn't get enough. With that said, I will be reading or listening to the audiobook. This was actually my first time listening to it as an audiobook, but I will be reading or listening to the 5th one just because it's 350 pages. So for once, it's going to be like full-length novel, and that's when I will be deciding if I want to continue the series or not, because I just want to be happy. Like, the topic's interesting, the story's interesting, but it almost feels like episode of a TV show, which is fine in theory, but I feel like for books, it's not satisfying enough. Like, I need a full movie, you know? I would give it 3 stars. Another arc that I listened to as an audiobook was Broken in the Best Possible Way by Jenny Lawson. It's coming out first week of April, so like any minute now. This is my 3rd book of the author. She tends to write nonfiction that are kind of funny. They're usually about a difficult topic like her health or mental health specifically. So she kind of not makes fun of it, but she uses humor to cope, and I really enjoy her as a person. You kind of have to whenever you're listening to this kind of audiobook, or nonfiction, I should say. And she's very likable, she's very funny. I definitely laughed a few times, which I don't do very often whenever I read a book, even something that is supposed to be funny. But obviously, because it is humor, some chapters will resonate with you more than others. And there's only one thing, is because I was listening to it as an audiobook, I noticed that she had like a tick whenever she speaks, which, I mean, I'm here with an accent, but I'm just wanting to warn anyone just in case that you might prefer going through it as a physical book instead. Like the G at the end of words, she would pronounce it like a K, and it kind of became annoying towards the end because I kept noticing it. But I mean, no big deal, I guess. But yes, if you like her as an author, as a person, definitely do recommend this book. Also really good. I think my favorite is still Furiously Happy, but still definitely worth checking out Broken. Another arc that I did read was by Megan Miranda, and the book is called Such a Quiet Place. I love the author in general. This is my 4th book by her. She tends to write adult mystery thrillers, and she does it really well in the sense that they're like always comfortable. They're always pretty solid. They're never like a 1-star, but they're never quite a 5-star either. But she does a premise I really like, which is a murder mystery in a small town. I love the vibes every single time. In this one, it's even smaller. It's actually on one street. There has been a murder. 2 people, a couple are dead, and one of the neighbors was accused, went to prison, but then they were released because new things came out, and she comes back to live on the street. So everyone is obviously a little freaked out. Is she going to get revenge because people kind of ended up, being witnesses against her? And then if it's not her, who could it be? And things get messy. So super interesting premise. However, I feel like I was left a little disappointed. The ending wasn't super satisfying. I obviously can't really say much because that would be a spoiler, but I kind of wanted more, kind of expect something a little different. It is coming out July 13th, so I can't wait to hear other people's review, because it's always difficult when there aren't any other people's opinion, they're just yours. But yeah, I don't think it's my favorite by her. I think I'm going to end up giving it like 3, maybe like 2.75, which is kind of low for her. So yeah, I'm kind of a little disappointed with that one, but it was good in the beginning. That's what's annoying. Like, I really had high hopes for her. The end of the month was not super good, just gonna say it. I feel like I DNF'd 2 books that I was reading, and then I read 3 audiobooks that were just available like at all time at my library, because the ones I was waiting for weren't available. So I feel like whenever I pick just randomly, it can be so hit and miss. But I listened to the audiobook The Witches Are Coming, which I don't know the author, but she's the one that wrote the TV show Shrill, so you might know her. And it's essentially a nonfiction about feminism, and I did actually enjoy, especially the beginning. I did laugh a few times, which again, I don't do super often. However, I feel like the author could have went further with some of her thoughts, and it was quite short, which recurring theme for my life when it's short. I feel like I wanted more. And I don't know if it's because I'm Canadian or because I'm a bit younger than the author. I feel like some things she mentioned I didn't really know much about. She mentions how she used to be a big fan of Adam Sandler's movies, and then she rewatched them as an adult, and kind of goes on a rant talking about all of her issues with them, which I don't know his movies that much, so I didn't really have much feelings about that one. Or she mentions that the authors, the creators of South Park, turns out they're like diehard Republican and stuff. And I've never watched South Park, so again, didn't really shock me or anything. And even, I feel like some of the topics she mentioned, she could have went further. Like, she mentioned that she went to an event, a goop event, and obviously making fun of rich white people is always very easy about like detoxifying their body. But in my head, all I could think of is, why are you giving her more publicity and money? So yeah, I'm kind of just meh about this book. It wasn't bad, wasn't amazing. I feel like I agree with her with most of her things, but she could have went further. The next book I did listen to as an audiobook was I'm Afraid of Men, which I had seen here and there. I feel like the title is it grabs your attention, so I remembered it. So when I saw it again available at my library, I grabbed it. It's really short. It's like an hour and a half as an audiobook. It's less than 100 pages, which is going to be my main complaint about this one. You're following the author life story. It's kind of a little bit of a memoir, nonfiction, about the author transitioning. She's a trans woman. So you're following how, growing up, she perceived herself as being too feminine to be a boy, but also too masculine to be a girl, even nowadays. These parts were really interesting. I thought that was well done. I really appreciate how she was the one narrating her own story, which I feel like always makes it better. However, because it is so short, I feel like a few of the things that kind of left me a bit, it's hard to critique them, because I don't know if that's what she meant. There's just not enough context. You'll see, I'll give you a few examples. I feel like it's always so abruptly ending that I don't know. At one point she mentions how she was masturbating to a high school bully, which, like, why is that in the book? Like, there's no, like, it doesn't seem like there's much of a reason for it to be there, so I'm kind of okay. At one point she mentions that before transitioning, she was making one of her friend listen to a demo, and her friend was kind of wondering, why are you talking about beating up women? And at the time she was saying how, well, I'm not saying that, it's the expression, beating it out of you. Beat it out of you. And her friend was saying, well, yeah, but people are still only going to hear you talking, you know, about beating up women. Even as a queer man, it's still a man threatening that. And then she mentions that how I could think about was that I love women. Like, I wouldn't do that. And so you kind of just see that she at least used to have some internalized misogyny. And I feel like some of the other statements that I'll mention that kind of bug me a bit, I'm left wondering, does she still have some internalized misogyny, or is it just not explained well? At one point, one of the chapter literally ends with the sentence, well, for context, she mentions how she was dating a man as she was transitioning, and he ends up cheating on her. And she was saying, you know, in anger that he was basically like every other man, and he made me another stupid bitch. Which, the chapter ends on that note, and I'm just there wondering, is it just in anger you're thinking that, or is it how you feel about women? Like, do you feel like every woman that is cheated on is just a stupid bitch? She also ends the book by re-mentioning, you know, the title, I'm afraid of men for, you know, some of these reasons. And then she mentions how, but I'm also afraid of women. And I feel like she could have went into more details, because once again, she makes some statements and then just changes the topic. And again, it leaves me just not knowing, and maybe I'm seeing this from a cis woman point of view, obviously, but she mentions that she's also afraid of women because they're not standing up to men for her. And again, from my point of view, all I'm thinking is, but maybe they also are afraid of men. Like, there's just not enough context to really have an opinion. So even though I enjoyed the book for some of the things that she mentioned, obviously her own life experience, it's kind of hard to have a strong positive opinion about some of the other things that she mentioned. So I don't know how I feel about it. I feel like I probably should read more by the author to just have more of an opinion. Or if you have read it or listened to it, please feel free to talk about it in the comment section, because I don't know how to read this book, even though I don't really read nonfiction. And then on a less confused note, I listened to one more audiobook, which was Stay Sexy and Don't Get Murdered. I wanted to listen to this book 2 years ago when it came out, but I never got around to it. It is, once again, nonfiction about these two authors who did that podcast, still do that podcast, about murders. I know a lot of women are really into crimes and murders. I never got really into it, but a lot of people enjoyed the authors, so I did listen to it finally, and they're really likable, so I completely get that. It doesn't really make me want to go ahead and listen to their podcast because, again, not really my thing, but I'm happy I went into it because I still got something out of it. They were really funny and just likable, really. Okay, my camera's dying, I'm trying to rush. But yes, I do feel like some of the chapters didn't really resonate with me. Like at one point she's talking about growing up with her sister. That whole chapter was kind of just pointless to me. I don't really get it. But overall, still fairly enjoyable book. Not really my cup of tea, but I guess that if you love the podcast, you will love to listen to that book or read it. Last but not least, let me mention the book that I'm currently reading because I'm about 50% into it and I'm frustrated that I did not finish it, but at the same time, I'm happy I did start, and it is Children of God by Mary Daria Russell. This is the second book following The Sparrow, which I've raved about a ton. I've been calling it A Little Life of sci-fi, so definitely check out some trigger warnings before going into it. But it's a first contact with aliens that is super different and interesting because some of the people that are sent to, let me start from the beginning. Humanity hears music coming from a different planet, and a religious organization sends a team way faster than everyone else because they have the means and there's no, politics included. So they sent a team there to establish contact, and there are a few different timelines, including whenever they come back. There's one survivor that was one of the priests, and it's a rough read, but it was really interesting. So this is a follow-up, and so far it's very heavy. I am so mad about some of the stuff that's happening, but at the same time, I'm not sure how much I'm enjoying it. I feel like the ending will be like a hit or a miss for me, but I feel so bad for that character. That's all I have to say, or all of the characters really. So yeah, definitely we'll keep you updated, but I just wanted to mention that I did start it finally, and hopefully I am enjoying the second half. That's gonna be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know if you have read any of these books. What are your thoughts? I want to know. Also, what was the best book you've read in March? I want to know. Thumbs up, subscribe. I will be putting more videos on the screen that I recommend you check out, and I will see you in my next one very soon. Bye. I was able to finish it before it died. Barely, but I made it.